Sometimes that helps. So we're continuing with our reading of the beautiful fourth canto after we had a nice meditation on Krishna's Leela in Vrindavan of taking care of the bad guys. I was at a store the other day and we heard the Mr. Grinch song came on. You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. And I never caught it, but one of the characterizations of Mr. Grinch and why he's so bad is that he has garlic in his heart. Which I thought was a fun way to call somebody a demon. So we can assume that Kamsa and Hiranyakasipu and Ravan and all those guys, they also have some garlic in their heart. That's the problem. So we had a beautiful meditation there, and now we're in the fourth canto and continuing chapter 25. And this is a famous section of the Srimad Bhagavatam where Narad Muni is preaching to King Prachinibhari, using the analogy, the metaphor, the story of King Paranjana. And I was noting actually a few days ago in the text, Narad Muni says, I will describe a history to you. And he says that to King Prachinibhari, that this is a history that I'm going to share. I'm going to share a history. And later, King Prachinibhari realizes that this so-called history is actually a kind of metaphorical description of his own existence. And Narad Muni, the kind saint who's concerned with the spiritual welfare of everyone, is trying to help the king who's overly concerned with his material situation. He's trying to help him see that maybe he's not living life in the best way. And that dawns on King Prachinibhari. He kind of picks up what Narad Muni is putting down eventually. But it's interesting that Narad Muni presented it as a history. Sometimes we have to, you could say, white lies. little framing is given that is favorable for the person to understand things. So later on, they'll get a little bit of a different understanding, but the essential meaning won't be lost. Is that this is a story, but it's also a history of so many materialists. In one sense, it's the reality that everybody in the material energy has this consciousness. And if and until this consciousness is supplanted by a desire to serve Krishna, by a desire to develop bhakti, then you're going to go the way of this guy. Just as all other kings who thought they were the emperors of all they survey ultimately wound up being. From dust you came and from dust you will go. So King Prachinibhari comes to recognize this eventually. And we're in the section today. Lokaram Prabhu has kindly begun to break up the Bhagavatam into, you could say, thematic sections through the text, so we can kind of cover one idea through each of our discussions in the morning, which I think is really helpful. I know other places like Krishna House do that approach, and in that way we get a little more of a comprehensive understanding of the flow of the Bhagavatam. Sometimes it can be difficult when you just go verse by verse.
Krishna House, I think they do the Bhagavatam, the entire Bhagavatam once a year.
Yeah, they do the whole Bhagavatam in a year, so their pace is even more rigorous than ours in one sense.
They may hop around a bit.
They cover the major pastimes, I know. So we're in a similar attempt to create a more cohesive experience for our morning study. We're doing something similar. So I like how Lokaram Prabhu has broken things down for me today. And essentially, I'm going to focus a lot on Prabhupada's purports. We're just going to read the verse and then read something from the purport, and then read the verse and something from the purport. I might say a little something in between. But the general framing of today's focus is the vision that we ordinarily have of our own bodies, which is as this kind of palace of pleasure. Right? This is a pleasure house for my enjoyment. And I go to different parts of or a kingdom, really. That's how it's better characterization. It's a kingdom for my enjoyment. And you go to different parts of your kingdom at different times to enjoy different things, right? Sometimes you go to a nice park. Sometimes you go to the theater. Sometimes you go to the feast hall. But when you're the king of the kingdom, you roam anywhere you want and everywhere you want, just kind of orchestrated for your enjoyment. And that's the perception, that's the kind of concept that we have of our own material existence if and until we wake up to spiritual life. And that ultimately, what is that conception pinned on? It's pinned on the desire, the need for the living entity to feel happy. And so in this way, it's also important because there's going to be a lot of, you could say, shaming of this conception, and rightfully so, because it's shallow, it's unsatisfying. Still, though, I'll offer the caveat that we have to be careful when we approach people with this knowledge, not to shame them for wanting to be happy, because that desire is wholesome, that desire is natural, that sense of right, that I should be happy, I should feel satisfied in my life, I should feel safe. That is a healthy conception of self. That is part of Krishna consciousness. It's symptomatic of Krishna consciousness. It's not the goal per se, but just the result of the living entity aligning themselves properly with Krishna. But still, in the conditioned state, when we're experiencing so much harassment, that desire, that sense that I deserve to feel good is not wrong. What is wrong, what we take exception with, the problem that we have as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, as Bhaktas, and what we try to help people see themselves, is that they're investing that sense of hope for happiness in the wrong place. It's not in the strip club. It's not in 8 hours of video games or your Netflix subscription or the pretty girl or the fast car or the better paying job. And ultimately, happiness, safety, security, fulfillment aren't in those places. And so you're wrong for looking there, but you're not wrong for looking. So we want to be clear on that point as we move through some of these sections. And it doesn't get so heavy here, but it gets heavier later on. Ujjwal, you've got a comment for us? It's too bad. Sa ekada hima, forgive me, this is chapter 25, text 13. Sa ekada himavato dakshineshvata samasu dadarshi navabhir vabhir puram lakshita lakshanam. Translation: once, while wandering in this way, he saw on the southern side of the Himalayas, in a place named Bharatvarsh, India, a city that had 9 gates all about and was characterized by all auspicious facilities. So this text is establishing this metaphor of the body as the city of 9 gates. And Krishna discusses the 9 gates also in the Bhagavad Gita. He uses the same metaphor. Can anybody tell me what the 9 gates are? Can we count them off?
Eyes.
Nose. 2, ears. 4, nose. Mouth. And then genitals and anus. So the city of 9 gates. And these 9 gates are how we take in and also let out self-expression and desire. And some of the things that come out we don't desire, but they come out anyway.
Mostly gross stuff comes out.
As Vishnu's pointing out, mostly it's gross stuff, especially on either the gross or subtle level. It's gross stuff that comes out of these 9 gates when we're still on the bodily concept of life. Even when we're not on the bodily concept of life, even someone who is realized, they still have to deal with the excrements of the 9 gates because it's concomitant with the physical body. The physical body is there. And so having to deal with the byproducts of the body happens. How we deal with those byproducts is largely both, again, subtle and gross. And what we allow to come in, you are what you eat, as they say. And this is not only true of your physical self, right? That, okay, you eat a bunch of, we talked about a few days ago, that movie, Super Size Me, right? And this guy, like, he was healthy, he was doing okay, actually like above the average, well above the average for an American. And after like 15 days of eating McDonald's, his doctor was like, you might die, you have to stop this. 15 days straight of eating McDonald's, nothing but McDonald's. He's like, you might die. You might not live through this experiment you're doing of 30 days of only McDonald's. So you are what you eat in the physical sense, but you also are what you eat in the subtle sense. Your mind and your intelligence are directly affected by what we consume on a subtle level, the vibration that we bring in. And it always confounds me and concerns me that I can hear the Grinch on the radio at the store, and that will be in my head for 3 weeks now. But I can spend 3 hours trying to memorize a verse from the Bhagavatam, and 2 days later, I can't even remember what canto it was from.
You can just Hare Krishna.
Yeah, right. We can put the Maha Mantra to the Grinch tune. But the momentum that our psyche has is so much oriented towards the material energy. It's so much. I'll just leave it at that. Our proclivity is there, so it's hard work to bring ourselves out of that tendency, that downhill momentum we already have, to be attached to be comforted by, to feel, good in connection with material stuff, however stupid or silly it might be. And we have a general kind of aversion to spiritual culture and spiritual vibration, spiritual vision, spiritual activity. There's a lethargy there. I know I'm supposed to, but tomorrow or later I can do that. But right now I just want to chill. I want to feel comfy within my material circumstance. So the city of 9 gates, and we're going to hear an elaboration on that detail, is referring to the body. And in this description that we're going to hear, it sounds pretty nice. Sounds like a good place to be. Of course, the purport, though, is that all of that appearance of safety and comfort is illusion. That it's not such a great place to be. It's not such a safe spot for the king to take shelter, although at first glance, it seems like it would be. So in the purport, there's something interesting to note. Prabhupada is saying the tract of land south of the Himalayan mountains is the land of India, which is known as Bharatvarsh. When a living entity takes birth in Bharatvarsh, he is considered to be most fortunate. Indeed, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has stated, Bharata Bhumi Te Haila Manusya Janma Yar Janma Sarthaka Kari Kara Para Upakar. Thus, whoever takes birth, and this Mahaprabhu is saying, whoever takes birth in the land of Bharat has a responsibility to do para upakar, to do real welfare work for all of humanity, which means to share India's spiritual knowledge. Srila Prabhupada landed in London, and because George Harrison had that connection with the devotees and he was appreciating Prabhupada's teachings, Prabhupada got a truly royal welcome. He got a private place to land. He was greeted on a red carpet. They had a big press conference in the terminal in Heathrow Airport. It was a big deal. BBC was there. And one reporter asked him, Swamiji, why have you come? And Prabhupada said, well, you Britishers came to India and took everything except this one thing.
I forgot something.
You stole our jewels, you stole our gold, you stole our everything. But you forgot this one thing, the most important thing, that I have come to give you. That is the spiritual knowledge of India. This is the real jewel. So many people over the centuries have come to plunder India for the spices and the jewels and the other resources of the land there. And there's so many wonderful resources that are unique to that place, because on a gross, even material level, there's something cool and special about India. And that can be seen. But that tract of land, what is cool and special about it and auspicious about it in the ultimate sense? Why do people have this innate kind of sense of attraction and mystique around India? It's because this is the tract of land where Krishna has chosen to appear, and so many of his devotees have gone. Prabhupada makes it clear in other places that this isn't the only place that the pure devotees go, or Krishna himself, but this is, you could say, the feature spot. So in Kali Yuga, as everything auspicious has been reduced, the last place, like a puddle that dries up, the deepest part of the puddle will still have some water in it. Even after, at first the puddle is very big, but the sun is out for a long time and there's not much rain. And so the puddle is reducing and reducing. And finally, there's just that little spot where it's still wet. We could call that India. It's this little spot on this planet Earth where there's still some inherent piety. There's still some inherent sense of God consciousness in the people. Prabhupada said, you scratch the surface of any Indian and you will find a devotee. And we've seen this to be the case all over the world. There's, the Indian diaspora of professionals, but when they meet the Krishna consciousness movement, wherever they are, whether it be in London or the US or South America, Australia, et cetera, wherever they are, there's this affinity that Indians have for Krishna consciousness, for bhakti, when it's presented in a faithful way, even if they grew up in a kind of Hinduism that was very foreign to the Krishna conscious culture. Some people think that it's easy for Indians to become Krishna conscious, but in many ways it's difficult for them from an external side because they have already so many habits which run against the way that bhaktas do things. You know, the kind of strictness we adhere to, the fidelity to Krishna, the giving of one's whole self, not concerning with your own position, your own wealth, your own comfort. That's not the kind of Hinduism that most people have grown up with. They've grown up with a kind of prosperity gospel, and similar to Christianity, you can see modern Hinduism as a kind of prosperity gospel using the Veda. So that's tough to stomach, but when they're presented in a faithful way, the opportunity to approach Krishna through the holy name in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see that many Indians are able to take it up. And because of that, Prabhupada elaborates in the purport, this is natural for an Indian. It's indicative of their karma that they were born in an auspicious place that has that momentum. And in their past life, there's been some connection to Krishna. And so they're having the opportunity to continue that, to pick that up again. So in our Krishna consciousness movement, our acharyas have emphasized not overemphasizing our birth, not overemphasizing where we were born as the only qualification for our ability to take a Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada famously is advocating and defending his goofball Western disciples who have come to India now with their shaved heads and their dhotis and their tilak, thinking that they're Vaishnavas and Brahmanas. And Prabhupada is having to defend that understanding against his own godbrothers even, what to speak of other people from a more traditional nationalistic Hindu Indian culture. Prabhupada is having to defend this concept that no, these are also Vaishnavas, they are also devotees because they're doing the practice sincerely. That's all Krishna cares about, is the bhava. That's what Krishna is looking for, is the sincerity of the person, not the birth of the person. However, we can't, and this mistake has been made, as is natural with conditioned folks, they throw the baby out with the bathwater. We throw the deity out with the abhishek, so to speak, that it doesn't matter at all where I've been born and what I've done. However, where you've been born, who you've been born, the situation you have, the family you have around you, the opulence or lack thereof is indicative of something. It's not arbitrary. It does indicate something about the life you chose to lead previously. That doesn't bar you from becoming Krishna conscious, but it can support or inhibit. It can put some certain obstacles in our way that we have to be conscious and overcome. It's like if there's a tree in the path, it's not that I can't go around the tree, but if the tree, or we could say a wall, if a wall has been built, I have to do something to get through it. It's not that the wall's not there. Now, it's not that the wall is insurmountable, but I have to take appropriate means to address that blockage in my path. So similarly, when we have taken birth in a certain situation, it's not that we can't be Krishna conscious, but it is healthy to examine and see, okay, what are the particular blockages or opportunities that my psyche, my social surrounding, etc., have given me. And this recognition that India is a favorable place to be born in for the purpose of taking the Krishna consciousness is something that Prabhupada is pointing out here in the purport per Mahaprabhu's own explanation. Text 25. That city was surrounded by walls and parks, and within it were towers, canals, windows, and outlets. The houses there were decorated with domes made of gold, silver, and iron. Prabhupada explains in the purport, gold represents goodness, silver, passion, and iron, ignorance, referring to the three modes of material nature. The body is also sometimes considered to be a bag containing three elements, three dhatu, mucus, bile, and air. Now, you won't see any of those descriptions in like Cosmopolitan magazine or GQ magazine, if anybody reads those, that this body is simply a bag of mucus, bile, and air. It doesn't sound as romantic as a six-pack or toned thighs or radiant smile or whatever other terms we use to describe what this body is composed of. But the Vedas are famous for being very reductionist in their description, taking all the romance out of the material energy. And that's what Prabhupada is doing here in the purport. This bag is really just mucus, bile, and air. But how are we seeing it? We're seeing it as gold and silver and iron, which are in their own ways very beautiful things. We're seeing it as parks and towers and canals, beautiful buildings with windows and foyers and porches. And so this analogy of the pleasant kingdom of the material body is going to be fleshed out in this way. But in the purport, Prabhupada is going to temper our excitement for the beauty of the metaphor and help us understand that what Narad Muni is really indicating here is the entrapping nature, the dangerous other side of this connection to the material energy. So Prabhupada finishes, according to the Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 84, text 13, one who considers this bag of mucus, bile, and air to be the self is considered no better than a cow or an ass. I keep on doing my own plan here. Text 15, the floors of the houses in that city were made of sapphire, crystal, diamonds, pearls, emeralds, and rubies. Wow, sounds like a great place to be, doesn't it? Because of the luster of the houses in the capital, the city was compared to the celestial town named Bhogavati. Purport, in the city of the body, the heart is considered to be the capital. Just as the capital of a state is especially gorgeously filled with various high buildings and lustrous palaces, the heart of the body is filled with various desires and plans for material enjoyment. Such plans are sometimes compared to valuable jewels such as sapphires, rubies, pearls, and emeralds. The heart becomes the center for all planning for material enjoyment. That's a gem of an idea. This is a saying that we have even in our own culture. The plans that the living entity has for happiness, these are our most cherished possessions, along with our excuses for not fulfilling those plans. Because as long as our plans remain unfulfilled, then we have some hope in an improved life, but we're also able to mentally cope with the very unfulfilling, very dissatisfying, very shallow existence that we actually find ourselves in. So this is funny catch-22, and if we're honest with ourselves, we all have these ideas and dreams and what ifs and I wills in our head and our heart, as Prabhupada is saying here, that one day it'll be like this, and then it will be happy. This wonderful idea I have, I'll have this many children, I'll live in this neighborhood, I'll work in this profession, I'll finish this book, I'll execute this project, I'll do this art, whatever it might be. One day we have these plans, we have these ideas, and these are being compared to sapphire and diamonds and pearls, these beautiful ornaments, gems that we keep in our heart. This plan making is what the material world is made up of. So many living entities, and everyone has, their plans can be reduced to eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Again, the beauty of the Vedas for reducing all of our romance in our plans to four things, right? What are these four things that we're figuring out? How can I be comfortable sleeping? How can I be comfortable eating? Who can I sleep with? And how can I defend my ability to do these things? This is what it all boils down to. The Prabhupada put it in a very striking way. He said, the dog is running on four legs. You are running on four wheels. What's the difference? Now I'm driving and I'm pulling into my parking deck in New York City or Chicago, and my parking is vouched for by my company. Otherwise, I'd have to pay $35 a day to park in that deck because it's in downtown, a very in-demand spot. And then I go up to the 30th floor of my company's skyscraper office building, and I have a window view out into the park, and I sit there and I move papers from one stack to the other, or numbers from one column to the other on my spreadsheet all day. And I feel very self-important. I feel very capable and accomplished in what I'm doing, not recognizing that all of that activity, as prestigious as it may seem, is really no different from the dog sniffing around on the ground for scraps in the street. Because the dog wants something to eat, and I also want something to eat. And when the dog catches a whiff of some female amidst looking for his scraps to eat, then he chases down that female and thinks, now we're going to have some real fun. And I do the same thing as I'm walking to lunch or I'm going to the bar after work. I'm looking around for an attractive mate, same sex, opposite sex, any sex these days, people don't care. And wherever I get the scent that enjoyment might be available, then I go for it. What's the difference between the dog and me? And this is what this metaphor is going to help Puranjana see. Prachinibari see in the metaphor of King Puranjana, which Narad Muni is giving to him now. Sounds romantic at this present. You can imagine Prachinibari sitting there, he's thinking, okay, this sounds like a pretty good place. It's a palace, and it's constructed with sapphire and crystal and diamonds and pearls and emeralds and rubies. That sounds like a wonderful place to be. Sounds like a very capable king, and he's got himself a nice situation. But Prabhupada, again, in the purport, is tempering our understanding and helping us this plan making, which everyone has a plan in this material energy, to be happy. And that's what keeps us going every day somehow. And the plan may be very feeble. I'm going to win the lottery. My relative is going to leave me a bunch of money, and then I'll marry rich, or I'll marry somebody with an American citizenship, and then I'll be able to go there. Our plan may be very far-fetched and feeble, but nonetheless, everybody has some sense of hope for happiness in this material energy. And what the power of this metaphor is that who could be happier than a person sitting in a palace of crystal and sapphire and pearls and diamonds? And yet still we'll find out that Puranjana is miserable, and he ends up in a very sorry situation. And that wakes up and helps Prachinibari snap out of it. Similarly, in Kali Yuga, it's not hard to look around and see that even those who are situated in the best way, those who seem to have it all, they're the ones that seem most harassed, if we're honest. They're the ones, the celebrities and the CEOs, etc., divorce, suicide, depression, drug abuse, rates for those things as high as they are in the normal society of humans these days, they're exponential in the society of these people. They all have psychoses of multiple levels because they made it to the top. They've gotten what they were told would get them happiness and fulfillment, and still not satisfied. Still, that those same pains and longings of the heart are present. And where do you go now? At least those of us at the bottom have some hope, although it's illusory, some feeble idea that, yeah, when I get there, it will all work out. But those guys are already up there. And now they're also saddled with the pressure of looking like they've got it all figured out. They're supposed to know what's going on. They're supposed to be the capable, accomplished people of our world. And yet, when we examine their personal lives, more often than not, they're very hollow, frail, scared people themselves who don't have much of anything figured out and are just maintaining the idea that they do because they have, that's their sense that if I reveal my own frailties, then I'll lose my position. And if I lose my position, dishonor is worse than death, as Krishna says. It's better to kill myself than to lose this position, even though it's not really making me happy. At least it's better than what these guys have got. Okay, we'll move on to the next text. Text 16. In that city, there were many assembly houses, street crossings, streets, restaurants, gambling houses, markets, resting places, flags, festoons, and beautiful parks. All these surrounded the city. Prabhupada elaborates, the heart of the body can be compared to the assembly house, for the living entities within the heart, along with the Paramatma. And thus the heart is the center of all remembrance, forgetfulness, and deliberation. As stated in chapter 15, text 15 of Gita, Sarvasya Chaham Hridi Sanjisto Matas Mrityugyanam Apohanam Cha. In the body, the eyes, ears, and nose are different places of attraction for sense enjoyment, and the streets for going hither and thither may be compared to different types of air blowing within the body. Excuse me. Again, reducing the romanticism of enjoyment. I want to go to a movie. But really, what's going on in that movie? What's being stimulated? Why am I happy watching the movie? My eyes are seeing something. My ears are hearing something. And that stimulation from those sense organs jolts my mind into some fantasy experience. I'm not really having the experience, but there's a feeling that something's happening because these senses are being agitated. And so the relationship between the mind and the senses, and then the intelligence and ultimately the false ego, confuses the soul into thinking, yeah, this is what's going on. This is me, and I'm happy doing this. I'm satisfied in this experience. It's something like going to a football game and just sitting in the stands and watching it. You're not even playing the game, but just by watching it, you're feeling some sense of connection with the team. And when some guy gets hit, you feel hurt. Some guy catches the ball, you feel excited that you did that. And there's a kind of weird crossover, or like, what would be the word? Not symbiosis, but there's like a telepathic connection between you and the goings on of the team, even though in actuality, they wouldn't know you from anybody else if they saw you on the street, the guys who are on the team. You have no involvement with them, they have no involvement with you. But the sense that there's some connection is created by that atmosphere of the stadium. We're all wearing the same colors and we're all cheering when the thing happens, or we're sad when the other thing happens. So similarly for the soul in the body, that we're identifying with these different avenues of stimulation for the senses, and the self is thinking, yeah, when I'm stimulated, I exist. That means that I'm real, and the kind of experience I'm having, good or bad, indicates the kind of life I have, good or bad, relative to the senses. But this quickly falls apart, this idea of an absolute good or an absolute bad in terms of sensual experience, as soon as you examine and see that everybody has a different way they like it. Everybody has a different set of sensual arrangements which they prefer. Some people like the food spicy, some people like the food sweet. It's funny, if you go to the beauty section, even beauty, something we would imagine is a little more objective, right? What looks pretty? Well, you go to India, you go to the beauty section, and the whole skincare section is filled with nothing but products to make your skin lighter, right? Become whiter, become closer to a Caucasian person. Then you go to the beauty section in America, the whole skin section is filled with nothing but products to help your skin look darker. Bronzer, toner, right? Look more like a brown person. And the Indians want to look more like the white person. And Krishna is laughing at all the persons, because none of us are our body, and yet we're investing so much of our sense of self into it. So this relative idea of good and bad, this relative idea of enjoyable and not enjoyable, pretty, ugly, white, black, sweet, spicy, we spend our whole life trying to move the pieces on the board into a favorable arrangement for our happiness. And at the end, the board is just turned over by time, just upended. Now you're dead. No more toner, no more bronzer, no more bleacher, no more hair dye, no more collagen, no more vitamins. Just, now you're dead. Now onto another body, and you have to start all over again. So
maybe a dark body or like
right. Maybe you get a dark body this time because you wanted it so bad. But it might not be a human body because you did a couple other things that now you're not qualified. So you get to be like a skunk. A skunk has a dark body. Or you get to be like one of those, a seagull. A seagull has a white body. So again, the crux of all of this is to help us recognize the futility of over-investment in this situation. A few more texts, is text 17. On the outskirts of that city were many beautiful trees and creepers encircling a nice lake. Also surrounding that lake were many groups of birds and bees that were always chanting and humming. Since the body is a great city, there must be various arrangements, such as lakes and gardens for sense enjoyment. Of the various parts of the body, those which incite sexual impulses are referred to here indirectly. Because the body has genitals, when the living entity attains the right age, be he man or woman, he becomes agitated by the sex impulse. As long as one remains a child, he is not agitated by seeing a beautiful woman, although the sense organs are present. Unless the age is ripe, there is no sex impulse. The favorable conditions surrounding the sex impulse are compared here to a garden or a nice solitary park. I'll read one more text in purport and then say something about this. The branches of the trees standing on the bank of the lake received particles of water carried by the spring air from the falls coming down from the icy mountains. The purport, the waterfall represents a kind of liquid humor or rasa. In the body, there are different types of humor, rasa or mellow. The supreme mellow relationship is called the sexual mellow, adi ras. When this adi ras or sexual desire comes in contact with the spring air moved by Cupid, it becomes agitated. So we're all looking for rasa. We're all looking for this joy, this pleasure that comes from the body. And the trick of material existence is centered around and pivoted from sex enjoyment. That's what really gets us going. And we've said many times, you can't even see an advertisement for toothpaste these days without seeing some sexually agitating representative for that toothpaste. Either a guy who's disproportionately muscular and tall and chisel-chinned, or some woman who has a little bit of a low-cut shirt and very nice, like wavy kind of voluptuous hair and toned skin and a beautiful smile, so that you'll buy your toothpaste. What to speak of other items like beer and restaurants, and the movie poster always makes sure to feature the gorgeous guy and the gorgeous girl. It's all centered around this adi ras, the sexual enjoyment. And so the downfall of the city of nine gates is its affliction and attention towards sex enjoyment. The way to liberate, the way to free ourselves from the entrapment of the city of nine gates, is to give up our desire for material, mundane sex enjoyment, and instead give that attention to Krishna's pleasure, which also culminates in transcendental sex enjoyment. The romantic relationship between Krishna and the gopis is the pinnacle of experience. It's the pinnacle of existence. So again, we're not wrong in recognizing the opportunity in sex enjoyment. We're wrong in thinking that that opportunity is my own. That my sex enjoyment in this material energy is going to bring me happiness. That's the problem. Therein lies the rub, as Shakespeare put it. But when we recognize that Krishna's transcendental sex enjoyment, his romantic connection with the gopis, which is completely different from what we see on TV and what we hope to do ourselves from time to time, completely different from mundane sex life. We won't get into those details today, but just understand that to be the case. The sex enjoyment of Krishna, the romance experience in the spiritual world, is uplifting for all living entities. And by giving Krishna pleasure, it automatically gives everyone else pleasure. In the same way that when you water the root of the tree, all the elements of the tree become nourished, the branches, the leaves, the fruits, etc. So as we began by saying, the pursuit of happiness is not wrong, but the avenues in which happiness is pursued, that's where we find qualm. Again, the attention to sex life is also not wrong, but the attention to our own personal sex life, that's where we find a problem. The attention to our sex life within this material energy, that's where the issue is. But when we put our attention on the relationship, the romantic relationship between Radha and Krishna and the gopis, then that's where we find actually the highest experience of any element of Krishna's creation. Text 19, we'll finish up here. In such an atmosphere, even the animals of the forest became non-violent and non-envious, like great sages. Consequently, the animals did not attack anyone. Over and above everything was the cooing of the cuckoos. Any passenger passing along that path was invited by that atmosphere to take rest in that nice garden. This is a funny purport from Prabhupada. A peaceful family with wife and children is compared to the peaceful atmosphere of the forest. Children are compared to non-violent animals. Sometimes, however, wives and children are also called Swajapya Dasyu, burglars in the name of kinsmen. A man earns his livelihood with hard labor, but the result is that he is plundered by his wife and children, exactly as a person in a forest is attacked by some thieves and burglars who take his money. Nonetheless, in family life, the turmoil of wife and children appears to be like the cooing of the cuckoos in the garden of family life. Being invited by such an atmosphere, the person who's passing through such a blissful family life desires to have his family with him at all costs. This was fun for me to read today and yesterday when I was preparing for our discussion, because yesterday Vrindavani and I went out to the store and we went Christmas decoration shopping because she loves Christmas. And so it makes her happy to have a few Christmas decorations around the house. And I also remember Christmas fondly when I was growing up. My mom always went all out and it felt very good and comforting. And so I was very happy to see my wife happy. And I was very happy that, spending $20 can put such a smile on her face. And so there I was enjoying this situation, which is being described by Prabhupada here in the purport. And if I'm not careful, then I'll end up being plundered. I'll end up being robbed of my real interest by my well-meaning partner who also knows her own real interest. And so in our devotee community, we have a very sometimes difficult, nuanced line to walk. We see in the third canto, Kapila Dev's father, who right now I'm blanking on, Kasyapa Muni. Kasyapa takes care of Devahuti like no one has ever taken care of a wife. Devahuti gets everything she wants. But when it's time, both Devahuti and Kasyapa are able to walk. They're able to give it up. And in our own Krishna conscious communities, we've suffered a lot for not recognizing the responsibility of giving our children and our wives or our husbands a comfortable situation. Not too comfortable, not comfortable to the point that they get distracted, but comfortable enough that they are not distracted by their discomfort. Comfortable enough that with their main thrust of energy and focus, they can see and be and worship Krishna. Be with and worship Krishna. That's required. And depending on our conditioning, depending on our material nature, different arrangements need to be made, right? Ladies are especially endowed with a psychology that requires a certain atmosphere. Whatever they grew up with is generally what a woman needs to see in their surroundings in order to feel safe, in order to feel comfortable, in order to feel capable of nurturing their children in a way that their children feel safe and comfortable and feel a sense of trust, such that that trust blossoms into faith in not only their family and their worldly situation, but ultimately Krishna. And because we don't have that dynamic in society today, then we see so many people who are faithless, because if your parents, if your mom and dad can't even give you love and satisfaction, how can you believe that there's an all-knowing, all-powerful God out there who's capable of loving everyone everywhere all the time? It's too big a leap to cross when you've had such a miserable experience of family life. So for a mom to feel like she's giving her children what they need, so that the children grow up feeling like we've got what we need so that they can become healthy adults. It's the responsibility traditionally of the husband, but somehow or other we have to figure out a way to create this atmosphere of enough comfort and security in the material energy, whereby people can use the rest of their energy to focus on Krishna. The false attempt to, and this is why, just as a point of referencing Vedic culture, and one of the, sometimes we think it's a peculiarity that a woman is not supposed to marry down, right? If a woman is born in a Brahminical family, she's not supposed to marry a Kshatriya. Doesn't matter how wealthy he is, doesn't matter how big a palace he'll put her in, because she won't feel comfortable with the psychology of a Kshatriya. She needs the psychology of a Brahminical atmosphere to feel uplifted, to feel comforted, to feel safe. And money can't buy consciousness. So the Kshatriya guy or the Vaishya guy, the wealthy business guy, is not going to provide probably, generally speaking, won't be able to provide the psychology and atmosphere that the lady needs to feel comfortable in order to do her duties of taking care of the children, raising them in a happy way, and giving also the man the satisfaction that he needs from his wife. The psychological upliftment and encouragement that a man depends upon from his wife. So a lady can marry up, because if she enters into a better atmosphere, often just like a diamond in the dirt is still a diamond, but it may not appear as such. But then when it's placed in a nice facet, then you're like, wow, that's quite a nice diamond. But you might not notice it sitting in the dirt. So from the lower rungs of society, if a woman is brought up, then her good qualities are usually only just augmented, at least in past ages. These days, Kali Yuga is such a swirl and a tornado. None of these are certainties. But speaking on principle, when a good woman, even from a low-born situation, is placed in a high-class society, she rises to that occasion. But it's actually very hard for a man to do so. A man is much safer staying where he's at. So a man is never supposed to marry a woman from a higher station. So these psychological, again, to go back to the point earlier, birth is not everything, but it's not nothing either. And we're much, much safer. Why spend so much useless time and energy trying to fight against the current of our conditioning? Krishna doesn't say change your conditioning. He says release your attachment to it. It's not that the current flows a different direction now. It's not that up is down or down is up. But understanding and recognizing what are my particular proclivities, now recognizing the truth of that situation, do some service for Krishna. If I'm a shovel, better dig than hammer. I can hammer. A shovel can be used as a hammer, but I'm much better suited digging a hole. So dig a hole for Krishna. If I'm a hammer, yeah, I can excavate dirt. I can dig a hole eventually, but it's not very efficient. Better I hammer something or break something. That's what I'm best suited for. So rather than trying to fight our conditioning, that's not what these sections are about. These sections decrying the attachment to the body are not about creating a kind of absolute reductionist standard of material existence, as they've been mistakenly confused by our society for many years. These sections are about helping us recognize our particular situation for what it is, and then being detached in the way, not of rejecting it, but of accepting what's favorable for Krishna's service, and with the rest just tolerating. That's how it is. It's not that Raghunath Das could no longer be a rich man's son, but he didn't want to have to deal with the business side of life. And Mahaprabhu made him stay in that business side of life until he matured to the place where he could genuinely renounce it, genuinely give it up. So before it's something genuine, before it's something wholesome, before we really have deep, deep, deep attachment to faith in Krishna, better to spend our time trying to develop that deep faith and attachment to Krishna than trying to create some pretense of renunciation in the name of following the strictures of the renunciate version of Vedic culture. Okay, dear devotees, so I'll conclude there. I see Kelly was watching this morning, Fran, Hartwell, Garrison, and Brandon. Hope you're still with us. Hare Krishna. Hope everyone's well. Any comments or questions from the devotees? Or anybody that was here in the chat, you're welcome to chime in.
I think it's just this.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's true.
There was mention of a cow being like right alongside an ass.
Huh.
And I know when I read that originally, it struck me just in terms, because we tend to hear the cow
cows
glorified.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had comments on that.
So Bhishma Prabhu was pointing out that the cow is in a few texts prior and in other places, the cow is compared to a normal animal, so to speak, that, and don't be dumb like a cow. Don't be animal-minded like this cow or ass. And then the donkey we often, decry because the donkey works so hard all day for the farmer and he doesn't have to. He can just eat green grass in any natural field anywhere. But just in the same way that men work so hard like asses to achieve something that is easily had by the kind of common course of life, if they just accepted it that way. So these, it's a little striking. Why is the cow being decried? Devotees brought this up to Prabhupada also, and Prabhupada said cow is still an animal, right? So it is an animal in the mode of goodness, but it's still an animal. And so the cows, there's auspiciousness present in the cow. Still, though, we see the mentality of the cow is animal-minded. The at Goloka Premadam, we see, how do you get the cows to do something? You feed them, right? You want the cow to go somewhere. You put some sugar in that place. You put a salt lick there. You put some hay, and the cows will come. If you reason with the cows, Surabi, some nice young people are coming and they want to pet the cows. So you come out here and you be nice so that they can feel excited about being here and feel enlivened in their Krishna consciousness. Surabi won't register. Surabi is not going to listen. She doesn't have that capacity. So it's while still being in the mode of goodness, it's like cow dung also, or what's something else in the mode of goodness? Fresh vegetables. It's not that they're conscious and sentient, but they're fresh vegetables. So as much as vegetables can be in the mode of goodness, they are, but it's still a mode of nature. And so we still have to recognize that it's a reduced, it's certainly a reduction of full consciousness. And compared to a human, it's not a great place to be. Does that clarify? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, dear devotees. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhishya Kripasunabhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.